Well, let's get to the news. Let's get right to former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, former Georgia Congressman and Judiciary Ranking Member Doug Collins. Okay, Mike Huckabee, first to you. A new CBS poll, Trump has his widest national lead over Biden ever at 5 points. It's 52 to 47. 538, Trump is up 4 points. Mike Huckabee, people saying that was an exciting, momentous, electrifying RNC like no other, but we got reports coming in now, Mike. The Biden campaign just concluded their all-hands-on-deck phone call. He's not dropping out. Reports are coming in that Biden is saying it's also about protecting his 50-year legacy, and he just now is saying he's the unifier. Isn't his party fracturing?
You know, it's a tough thing for Joe Biden. I think Doug and I would both tell you that the only thing harder about getting in a race for political office is the decision to get out. And Joe Biden's having a real hard time, probably because he's really not that cognizant of how everything is coming down on him. But the sad thing is Joe Biden has a choice to go out gracefully on his own terms and make the decision, or it looks like the Democrats are going to keep getting to the point of frustration where instead of letting him make that decision, they may just decide to throw open the convention and toss him out the door. And that's a terrible way to end his political
career. It's really something. So it was an emotional moment, Doug, of connection last night. President Trump really capturing everyone's attention for the first time, talking about how he was nearly assassinated. He also embraced the fire gear belonging to Corey Comparatore. The funeral held today for the former fire chief who was killed by that assassin's bullet. Let's watch President Trump here.
I will tell you exactly what happened, and you'll never hear it from me a second time because it's actually too painful to tell. When I heard a loud whizzing sound and felt something hit me really, really hard on my right ear, I said to myself, wow, what was that? It can only be a bullet. And moved my right hand to my ear, brought it down. My hand was covered with blood. The amazing thing is that prior to the shot, if I had not moved my head at that very last instant, the assassin's bullet would have perfectly hit its mark, and I would not be here tonight. We would not be together.
Doug, a really emotional moment. Your reaction?
My reaction is I know with Mike and Liz that y'all have both been with this president. That was the time when you see what many of us have seen over the years is sort of that Donald Trump that you don't see very often, but it's very real. And it's the very thing that connects with Americans. They understand that he cares. Those were the moments in that first part of that speech when people were really paying attention that showed beyond the veil, but beyond this guy who is a president who makes big speeches, who talks and tells us what he wants to do. But it showed that he was at an event that really humbled him. But it also, I think, focused him on why he's running. And you saw it all throughout the week with his kids, with his grandkids. When people were speaking, you showed an engagement and facial expressions that showed that he's really taking in this moment. I can't wait to see the fall with him campaigning. And that being a part of how he goes about showing that compassion that we have seen, that I've seen in others, and Mike, I know you have, and Liz as well, that we've seen, and it's going to be expressed coming from this campaign. I think people are going to really react to it.
Yeah, he's got a rally tomorrow in Michigan with J.D. Vance. So, Mr. Huckabee, what Doug just said, your reaction to what Doug just said, you know, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg now calls President Trump a, quote, badass. Okay, that got me saying a bad word on TV. But your reaction to all this, Mr. Huckabee?
Yeah, you're sounding like my mother, who never could curse, so she would just say sometimes, that guy's got himself in a mell of a hess, and that was as close as she could come. I think I sensed that on you, Liz.
Good, I'll use it.
What I think we saw this week was Donald Trump intuitively reacting as a leader does. That moment he was shot, there's no preparation for that. You don't have a textbook, you don't train for it. That was an intuitive reaction for him to stand up, blood coming down his face, fist in the air, and saying to that crowd to reassure them, fight, fight, fight. What we saw Joe Biden in a juxtaposition picture was him crawling up the steps of Air Force One with COVID. So one guy is overcoming a bullet wound and the other guy is overcome by COVID. That's the campaign. And I just don't see how the Democrats work their way out of this with or without Joe Biden, because if he gets off the ballot, they still have to defend their horrible policies. And Donald Trump can run on what he has done as president. And I'd rather take his positions any day of the week, twice on Sunday.
Yeah, so the governor just said that's what we're hearing, too, that no Democrat wants to step in and have a black mark on their record, you know, at the 11th hour, stepping in for Joe Biden. They're in a mad scramble to see who would want to do that. Doug, I want to back up. There's context here that I think is being, you know, some of the media are missing. We are in a unique American moment, Doug. You know, polls for years show Americans have been saying politicians broke the compact. They broke faith with voters who pay their paychecks. They have said, just keep us safe, keep us prosperous. Trump is saying he's going to do that. Pew Research says, you know, party control of D.C. has been whipping back and forth with accelerating speed for generations. The polls show the discontent and distrust in government, Doug. It's the Vietnam War, Watergate, Iran-Contra, George H.W. Bush's read my lips, no new taxes, Bill Clinton lying about his sex scandals, Dick Cheney falsely claiming Iraq has WMDs, dragging America into war, the financial crisis, those bailouts, Obama polarizing and dividing America with far-left ideologies, lecturing America is bad, only he can fix it, and Joe Biden and his family doing the same thing and profiting, accused of profiting, from government access, selling influence. Voters have been saying Donald Trump is not beholden to anyone, that he just wants to fix America.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. And I think you heard this from J.D. Vance. I think that was one of the reasons why you saw the vice president pick made like it was. I think Donald Trump comes at it from a different perspective. He comes at it from a business perspective that is coming forward, though, with many years of experience of dealing with public, dealing with that, you know, from the entertainment side to the building side. He understood how to get things done. And people are desperate for that. Look, I made this comment on Mike's show, Huckabee show as well. We've got to get back to not divorcing politics and reality. And Donald Trump does that very well. He makes reality statements. He talks about what we can and can't do and what he wants to do. And I think that's the affirmation that people need to see, that they don't need a government that just tells them what they think they need to hear. They need a government that actually works for them.
That's
and too many people have disconnected because of that.
That's right. You know, so let's get your reaction, Governor, to President Trump talking about healing America, policy fixes to fix America's broken business model. Watch this.
We have an inflation crisis that is making life unaffordable, ravaging the incomes of working and low-income families, and crushing, just simply crushing our people like never before. So tonight, I make this pledge to the great people of America. I will end the devastating inflation crisis immediately, bring down interest rates, and lower the cost of energy. We will drill, baby, drill. At the center of our plan for economic relief are massive tax cuts for workers that include something else that's turned out to be very popular. It's called no tax on tips. No tax on tips. Next, we will end the ridiculous and actually incredible waste of taxpayer dollars that is fueling the inflation crisis. And all of the trillions of dollars that are sitting there not yet spent, we will redirect that money for important projects like roads, bridges, dams, and we will not allow it to be spent on meaningless green new scam ideas. I'm going to protect Social Security and Medicare. Democrats are going to destroy Social Security and Medicare.
You know what he said that's really interesting, Governor? Show what the House Budget Committee is saying. He's saying redirect all that government waste, trillions of dollars since 2001, we've found. You know, you could hire more cops, teachers, firemen with that. I mean, the House budget says Biden's own executive actions outside Congress have cost taxpayers over $2 trillion. Final word.
Well, the reason Donald Trump is so popular with voters, particularly working class, is because he's speaking to Main Street, not to Wall Street. He's actually talking to the people who eat at Waffle House, not the people who eat at Ruth's Chris. And that's one of the reasons Donald Trump is going to win, because there are more of those folks who are the common, hardworking Americans than there are the elites.
You know, I could eat a pancake right now. But, you know, Doug Collins, I want to give you the final word, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, it's about reacting to people. It's about acknowledging what they're going through. It's about not lying to them and not telling them what they see with their own eyes is not true. Donald Trump is reality to them, and I think that's what makes it special.
Governor Huckabee, Congressman Doug Collins, thanks for joining us. Great to have you both on, gentlemen.